Ваші сертифікати про прослуховування цього вебінару ви так само отримаєте трішки пізніше. Ми їх вам надішлемо, щойно вони будуть готові. Ну і, мабуть, з технічних моментів все. Можемо переходити до вебінару. Додатково підкажіть, будь ласка, чи всім нас чути, видно, чи бачите ви презентацію, чи все окей? Можна плюсиками в чаті. Так, супер, все окей. Що ж, ми тоді можемо починати. Лука, hi again.
Hello.
We could start.
Yeah, I understood that part. Okay, so let's start with the presentation. Hopefully, you already checked if everything is fine, and I still see the responses. First, I was already introduced. My name is Luka Milivojevic, and I'm technical sales specialist for LSMS in Thermo Fisher, basically responsible for the area, including Ukraine. And I will do basically a presentation about our solutions for нітрозаміну analysis with LC-MS. So there are many ways to do that, which I will also cover during the presentation. But this presentation actually focuses on the LC-MS workflow. So in the beginning, let's first have a look a little bit on the problematic of the analysis itself, or actually our company, let's say it like that. So we, as Thermo Fisher Scientific, this is a really large company and growing basically year to year. Thermo Fisher is basically the cover name, and there are different brand names, as you can see on the slide. Some of them you might know individually, like Fisher. They are selling chemicals and other things. Invitrogen, Patheon, Applied Biosystems, and the first one is Thermo Scientific, which is basically us. This is a brand name for our, let's say, AIG group and C&D, so chromatography and mass spectrometry division, where all these instruments are kind of based. So what you see on the instrument is actually the Thermo Scientific logo. So all in all, among all those things, we do many things. Like I mentioned, company is very large, but only in perspective of this analysis, or let's say analytical chemistry as it is, we can offer basically the complete solution. So everything from the consumables like columns, reagents, filters, and tips even, over basically chromatography instruments, which is then liquid chromatography, gas chromatography, and ion chromatography, and some others, and over basically through spectroscopy and spectrometry for mainly elemental analysis, and including, of course, the mass detectors, which are basically part of the hyphenated techniques, which are, let's say, GC, LC, or IC-MS. Usually, mass spectrometer doesn't work on its own unless it's like really dedicated for a specific purpose. So in this case, we will always be talking about LC-MS, which means liquid chromatographs, which is here. Let me just change the pointer. So liquid chromatographs coupled with basically one of the mass spec detectors. So that's kind of the hardware and the consumables. And of course, that doesn't even work, or that doesn't really do well without some software running it. So software can be considered as basically acquisition software, which is, we have basically two different acquisition or three different acquisition softwares, which is Excalibur, Chromeleon, Tracefinder, depending on the purpose. In this presentation, we will be mostly talking about Chromeleon. Of course, we are also offering some more application-specific software, which is mainly intended for data processing, like Biopharma Finder or Compound Discoverer. For one is for biopharmaceutical workflows, and the other one is for small molecule ID and metabolomic studies and differential analysis and so on. This is just to show like the breadth of portfolio. We will actually focus a little bit more to, like I said, LC-MS solutions and what it is and how it is used for нітрозаміну analysis. But first, let's have a look at the problematic itself. You probably already know most of these things. I'm just recapping it. Why are we talking about this? Why is this such a problem? And why a lot of companies now have to do this. So on top left, basically you see the basic structure, and there is a small table of the 7 regulated nitrosamines in the table. But basically, realistically, they don't have any industrial use. But when you have nitrates and nitrites and certain other amine compounds, so basically compounds with nitrogen, there is always a possibility that under certain conditions, nitrosamines as such will form. And this has been observed in many, many different products, including pharmaceutical products, which this presentation is mostly about. But it's also present in cigarette smoke, food, and a lot of different things. So this is not just pharmaceutical problem, but in general, much larger thing. But why is actually a problem? Because there are many compounds that are kind of byproducts or present as impurities in many of those things. Nitrosamines as such are considered strong carcinogenic compounds. So they induce cancer in human and other animals, basically. It's not very specific which cancer, but what we do know is they are carcinogenic. So basically, we don't want them in anything we eat, consume, or are basically in contact with. So that's the base of the problematic. How it happened in the pharma industry, it's not a really super new problem, but it's not so old either. So in 2018, they first observed some of the nitrosamines in valsartan, basically. So that was kind of one of the first observations where these products were retracted from the market and were tested for presence of nitrosamines. The whole problem didn't really escalate at that point. This took until 2019 when FDA found some more nitrosamines, specifically NDMA, in ranitidine medication. So at that point, they pulled all the lots that were that's happened in the US that were part of the shipment and were considered potentially contaminated. So they created a lot of fuss and a lot of confusion. So what to do, how to test them? You will see on the next slide that some testing methods were available, but many were come later. So this was then happening for basically 2 years, how to tackle this problem, how to actually standardize how to the testing of the products. And in the meantime, FDA basically recommended our Q-Exactive Plus instrument, which is a high-resolution mass spectrometer, to test the samples. You have their report, basically why they decided to that, and I will talk a bit later why high-resolution mass spectrometers are basically the best approach to do this. But sorry, in June and September 2020, finally, European Medication Agency and FDA in the US released guidelines how to basically tackle this problem and what are the regulations about this. So this is just an example. It is still changing, so there were some changes even after those dates. But essentially what it says is they they required testing of 7 key nitrosamines for now. This will expand for sure to be so they said the limit at 30 ppb, which is a sum of all present nitrosamines, maximum sum. Both regulatory bodies basically asked for the same thing, and this kind of set the grounds for actual analysis and what pharma companies and many other manufacturers have to comply with. These are just 2 regulatory bodies. Of course, in Ukraine, there might be some other regulation. It's different from country to country, but many actually, it depends on which countries, which markets the product is sold. course, then you have to comply with the local regulations. And one of the two main ones is basically from EMA and the FDA. So now we know what we have to do, and of course, this is not really easy. There were methods existing even before. As you can see on the top of this table, most of the initial methods for valsartan, which was the original product where this became really a problem, were done on GC-MS. There was one method, this is like done on some sample prep triple quadruple LC-MS, but soon after, basically, FDA released LC high resolution method and suggested basically a high resolution mass spectrometer, in this case, our Q Executive mass spectrometer, for analysis of these compounds, because you will see there are certain problems. It's not so easy, even though the method looks easy, but realistically, it's not so easy to do. And with high resolution, we actually have some advantages while we are analyzing these things. After that, of course, this was also kind of moved to triple quadruple methods, because no regulatory body will limit just one way to do an application. So this is kind of open. And the updated triple quadruple method for analysis of NDMA in this case was released. And since then, many other methods were done, suggested basically. At the end, it's up to each company how they do that. We have a lot of applications, as you will see. But basically, that's kind of the idea how this evolved. And a lot of methods moved to the LC-MS side of workflows to tackle this nitrosamine problem. So all in all, as I already mentioned, it's not really easy to analyze these compounds. So on one side, we have the selectivity problem. These are very small molecular weight compounds. And for triple quadruples, it's specifically really hard to detect them in SRM mode, because you're fragmenting already small molecule into an even smaller fragment, which has to be then detected, and it kind of, with LC-MS, it falls into the noise region. So that's one of the problematics. Another thing what we see is like with high resolution accurate mass approach, you need good enough resolution to separate actually the interferences from actual analytes, like dimethylformamide and NDMA are very close with the mass in the spectrum. So that's one of the things. And of course, there are isomers, different basically contaminants already present in solvents, but you will see that later. So that's one thing. On the other side, we have to do this in a very sensitive way. Total content of all 7 nitrosamines has to be below 30 ppb, which is not that easy when you are analyzing basically a huge, one of my friends actually described it like shuffling the samples with a shower into the mass spec, because they are really, using a lot of kind of source analyte to actually detect these low amounts of nitrosamines that are potentially there. So sensitivity is of key importance to reach and to be actually to comply with the regulations. On the other side, all these things, because they are usually done for medication purposes, especially in pharma, all these workflow have to be compliant. So they have to follow certain regulations. This have to be GMP environment where everything is controlled, everything is traceable. So we also need the software and the complete solution to follow this path. So everything has to show the ability to trace back how it was done and what was actually done. So if somebody checks it, you always have to be able to prove how this was analyzed and how did you prove that your product doesn't have does have such content of impurities, in this case below whatever 30 ppb. So like I mentioned, it's not an easy analysis, but now let's see basically how to do this. In essence, we have many different ways to do this analysis. I already mentioned the GC workflow, which was the original approach. Today we have all these combinations. So here you have high resolution approach and triple quad approach on the right side. And on top you have the LC chromatography and below GC chromatography. So we have workflows in basically in all combinations of this kind of ways, of course, LC with high resolution and triple quad, and GC with triple quad and high resolution. That's what I mean. So each workflow has its advantages. GC approach has proven to be actually, at the end, the most sensitive, but for very specific compounds. So if somebody is only doing NDMA, they might stay like with the GC approach, and it would make sense. If you go to a broader panel of nitrosamines, and if you really want to be kind of future ready, because this panel will probably expand in the future, LC offers really universal approach where pretty much all of the compounds can be detected with good enough sensitivity, and it has a potential for expansion for another analyte, for other nitrosamine impurities, basically. So basically, GC is a good approach for one or two specific analytes, can be very sensitive, but on the other side, LC offers good enough sensitivity, but and together with universal approach and more expandable methods. So this is our LC portfolio. I will not lose too much time here. Basically, I just want to show you, so we when we go further down the line, we know what we are talking about. On top row, you have different versions of our liquid chromatography systems, basically. So the entry level, or the basic one, which goes up to 700 bar, is something we call Vanquish Core. And it's basically a routine workforce for pharma environment or any other routine environment. So where you don't really need super high pressures, a normal HPLC is enough. You can use Vanquish Core. They are all modular systems. They come with different detectors, with different options, but basically we did diversify them by pressure, maximum pressure they can reach. So this is a normal HPLC, Vanquish Core, and then if you go to Vanquish Flex, which is our UHPLC system, which means that it goes up to 1000 bar. For nitrosamine analysis, basically both are okay. So some of our customers are using Vanquish Core, some of our customers are using Vanquish Flex, and some of them are even using Vanquish Horizon, which is our top of the line UHPLC system, and it can go up to 1500 bar. So any of these three systems can be used for LC separation, but mainly we use Vanquish Core and Vanquish Flex due to the price mainly. And at the end is like a kind of an odd man out here, what we call low flow LC. It's called Vanquish Neo, and Vanquish Neo is can go from basically nanoliter flow up to, let's say, 100 microliter flow. So it covers the low flow range, mainly intended for proteomics. So it's not really part of this story, but yeah, just out of curiosity, so have this guy here for the very low flow. On the bottom line, we have different versions of the above mentioned HPLCs. So we have a method development systems, which are kind of tailored to help you with the method development. They include multiple columns, the valves automatically switch, and the more, after the run, you actually have a really good idea which stationary phase, which column, which mobile phase is the best for your application. So that's what is the purpose of this system. We have a lot of different 2D LC systems. You can do different ways of chromatography, either to increase throughput or improve selectivity with dual separation, many different versions of this system, which is usually not really used for nitrosamine analysis, except maybe the hard cut version, where we actually separate analytes. This is used a lot in pharma. Separation is done on, let's say, mass spectrometer non-compatible phase, like a phosphate buffer. You would destroy a mass spectrometer if you would use this mobile phase, but you still have to do, some qualitative analysis of detection with the mass spec. So what you can do with the hard cut system you separate compounds in one dimension, let's say with mass spectrometer non-compatible phase, and then you basically trap your compound in a loop and then push it to the other dimension where it's mass spectrometer compatible mobile phase, and you can actually detect and analyze your compound without really losing the retention time profile of your analysis. So the initial one. So the method was developed somewhere else, where they didn't use a mass spectrometer, but you have to use it now to prove what is there. So actually an interesting system for pharma, but not really for this case, maybe in some other things. We have the dual systems where we can basically, this HPLC has two detectors up here, and the rest is dual pump and dual autosampler, which means that you have two independent mobile phase lines, so two independent channels for analysis. So you put two columns here, and you can either double the throughput or work two completely different applications on the same system. So keep the front footprint of one HPLC, but you double the throughput, or actually do two analyses at the same time. And here is the purification LC, which is basically kind of a fraction collector for analytical scale. It's not a preparation device where you would, clean the 1 gram of your compound, but basically it's on the milligram level. You can still isolate your compounds, whatever they are, and this is really useful. So basically, it's just one module, which is a fraction collector here. And basically, just after separation, you collect whatever is there, dry it out, and you have a purified compound. The last is our multiplexing systems, or they are called transcend, when we can basically really scale up and multiplex these analysis. So this makes sense when you have a mass spec. So one mass spectrometer, and you are doing like several, you really need high throughput. So what we can do, we can use up to 4 columns at the same time, and we do all the analysis in parallel while mass spectrometer is only detecting the peaks. And also it has the sample preparation capability, which is more useful for clinical applications, not so much for pharma. But yeah. Okay, enough about HPLC. Hopefully you got an idea about this, but let's move to the mass spectrometers. So this is our mass spectrometer portfolio. In the beginning, we have single quadrupole MS, top left. This is not really used in this application because of the selectivity and sensitivity that it offers. But if you go further down, we have a quadrupole, triple quadrupole instruments. We have 4, which you will see on the next slides. And they are using quadrupole analyzers. So they have 2 analyzer quadrupoles in them and 1 collision cell. Another instrument that we also use for this application is our hybrid high resolution mass spectrometers, which is called now the Exploris series. Sorry. And they're using basically quadrupole analyzer to select ions, and then an Orbitrap analyzer to basically detect them with accurate mass and high resolution. The rest is not really part of this presentation. It's just here to show we have a whole lineup of tribrid mass spectrometers. This is our high-end research instrumentation where we use basically 3 different analyzers, and it's basically 3 mass spectrometers in one, but this is another story. And our latest introduction, Orbitrap Astral, which also has 3 analyzers inside. It's really a high throughput solution for proteomics and metabolomics workflows, but like that's another story. But we will focus basically the hybrid high resolution mass spectrometers and the triple quadrupoles, which are not used for this application. So first, the applications on the triple quads. As you have seen before, this is our lineup of the triple quadruple instruments. It's like with any other company, we have different tiers of instruments. Mainly, they differentiate with the sensitivity they can achieve. These are just some noise values for reference. We are actually doing much better. So TSQ40 Plus is our entry-level triple quadrupole instrument. Then we have, from the previous line of triple quads, we left TSQ Quantis without the plus, which is kind of in between the TSQ Quantis Plus and Fortis Plus. So it offers some, it's good enough to basically to do all these applications. It's a little bit, more cost effective, so it's a little bit cheaper instrument, but of course it offers a little bit less sensitivity than the new version Quantis Plus, which is normally the instrument we use for нітрозаміну analysis. The top tier instrument Altis Plus has the highest sensitivity, but of course also the highest price. You will see later on, we can use any of these for нітрозаміну analysis. The analysis will be compliant even with the Fortis Plus. It's a little bit on the edge for my taste, but basically any of the triple quads can do the analysis according to regulations. This is just your choice, and if there is any other applications that needed to be done, then it plays a role. So this is how the method looks like. It's a standard method where we use basically Vanquish Core or Vanquish Flex system. One of the two columns depends on the application node. Basically, it's depending on the API we are analyzing. Basically, in this case, it was done on several different things. So we are also using different columns, either Accu Core AQ or Hypersil Gold Phenyl column, which are shown here. So this part does the separation, and then we can use basically any of the flavors of triple quad instruments. At the end, they are all sensitive enough to be compliant. But like I said, so our Pantheon Pharma Services is using, for example, Fortis. TSQ Fortis, this is basically the entry tier triple quadrupole, and they are doing, they're basically doing contract analysis for their customers on the TSQ Fortis. For my taste, I would actually go a little bit higher. At least usually we use TSQ Quantis, where you have enough margin basically to do all these analysis confidently, and you have no problems, being kind of on the border, which long term, if something gets contaminated, if you are on the border, you will immediately fall off. If you have some margin, you will still continue to run and actually plan the cleaning or whatever you need. So they are robust and very good instruments for this application. And at the end, you will see this all the time, is our Chromeleon 732 chromatography data system. And this is our compliance-ready platform of software which can be scaled up to enterprise solutions. So this means that it can be either a single workstation installation, or we can scale it up to a full company installation where data is stored on the server or backed up on the server. Licensing is controlled by a server, so you can have processing PC in another country or another continent. It really depends on you, but basically the software is scalable up to whatever you want, from a single workstation to whatever you want. All in all, a triple quad solution, like I mentioned, is triple quads are very repeatable, robust workhorses. So if you have a workflow that does not need any expansion, so you need it only for this specific method and not really very often, triple quad will do the job. They are very repeatable instruments. They reach the sensitivity levels. So basically you have a very stable solution. But of course, it's a little bit limited with the triple quadrupole instrument because it's like potential for expansion is not really super large, like with high resolution MS, which you will see later. It will, like I said, if you do one or two of these compounds, or even all of them, they will work. But with a high resolution MS, it's easy. Right? So triple quads can do the job, but we normally suggest actually a high resolution MS in this case. This is just to show you that we have tested basically all the solutions, and we have a lot of installations of both high resolution mass specs and triple quads in many pharma companies. There are some value levels which will appear on different slides. Please be careful. So what we have done, we have tested these things on real matrix. There are some really wonderful or amazing applications floating around basically, where they detect really, really low levels of this. Please be careful. It really makes a difference if this is done on a real sample or if this is something that was done only on a standard. that's completely different story. If you have matrix, нітрозаміну analysis is not that easy anymore. Without the matrix, it's really straightforward. So what we did on all those applications, we actually used real matrix to show what can be done. Sensitivity is really also depends on the API or the matrix itself. That's why we are always showing, and depends how it's prepared. So we always mention how it's prepared, like in this is 20 milligrams per milliliter of the basically the sample. So all in all, this is for your orientation, and here I can mention also something else. These are the 3 tiers of instruments. Basically, Fortis, it's good enough, shows a little bit higher numbers. So APCI is in red color, so it's a different way of analyzing compounds, and we also have application of ESI or HESI, electrospray ionization. So this is just to show you different ways of doing this application. At the end, it is your choice. But usually we use APCI approach because it's a little bit more sensitive for most of the compound, actually. So it's like compromise, but APCI is kind of our way to go now. And you can see also the values sometimes are lower for most of the analytes. Sometimes they are higher, depends really what you are analyzing. Like I said, Fortis is kind of on the border. If you want to do, like I would always suggest PSQ Quantis Plus, basically, for triple quad solution of this. Why? Because we also have Altis, but you don't really see a large improvement. The problem is that I mentioned already before, these are very small, low molecular mass compounds, and the fragments, when we do SRN on a triple quad, always falls into the noise region of the LC-MS analysis. So that's the same for everyone. That's why triple quads have had a little bit of issue, and in the beginning, that's why FDA also suggested this way, because realistically, it is a problem. The smaller the molecule is, the bigger the problem is. That's also why on Altis, which is normally much more sensitive than Quantis, we don't see this in нітрозаміну analysis. So most of our competition is actually offering their top tier instruments for this kind of analysis. We can do the same or better on a mid-tier instrument, so with a triple quad range. So we don't need to go with Altis, which is our top tier instrument. Quantis will do the job perfectly well. Okay, so that's kind of the summary of the triple quad solution. So it's a very robust method. It's suitable basically if you have, if you need to check for 1 or 2 or whatever, or if you have a very standardized method, you don't see any, you don't see the need for expansion or anything, then triple quad solution will work fine. In these methods, we have proven basically that we really see the the high repeatability, basically low, RSDs on all the samples, on areas, and retention times. It's sensitive enough, and as triple quads usually are, they are a robust, proven workhorse that will work. But of course, it's a little bit limited in the compound panel, which you need to analyze. I mentioned before, these compounds will increase because there is not only 7 or 10 or whatever, 12 nitrosamines, there is many more. With triple quads, you're kind of stuck there. Like I said, if you want to analyze only this, fine, this is a good solution. If you need some expansion, high resolution mass spec will handle that much better. So maybe it's also time to move to the high resolution part, where this is actually the solution we usually offer, and this is the solution we have in most of the companies we work with. First, a little bit of our hybrid high-resolution LC-MS portfolio. So this is the full lineup, including the older platform, which is the executive platform. We have still 2 instruments here. The UHMR is specific native MS mass spectrometer, not really part of this thing. It's dedicated for analyzing really large proteins, viruses, and so on. And Q Executive was basically just announced to be discontinued. So realistically, the full lineup is Exploris MX, Exploris 120, Exploris 240, and 480. So the top 2, Exploris 480 is mainly really for proteomics and really high-level metabolomics. Exploris 240 we usually use also for entry-level proteomics and metabolomic studies or biopharma, kind of. So that is why for only small molecule analysis, which is нітрозаміну analysis is normal instrument and which does a perfectly good job, most of the companies actually bought this, is Exploris 120. This is our small molecule oriented high resolution hybrid MS. It can do all the jobs that kind of these guys can do for this purpose, but is limited for the other workflows. It has a little bit lower resolution. This number actually tells you the maximum resolution it can achieve. And but this is enough for what we do here. So actually a go-to instrument for нітрозаміну analysis is Exploris 120. We also have Exploris MX, which is a full scan only instrument. This is mainly intended for pharma QC. For this application, we are not using the MX instrument, but as I mentioned, rather Exploris 120. Okay, so this is how the whole thing looks inside. I didn't show you the triple quad schematic, but okay, maybe this is more interesting. It's relatively simple, so to run the methods and to run the instrument is actually simpler than to run a triple quadrupole instrument. We have inside ion transfer capillary, S-lens, which is intended for focusing of the ions, easy IC internal source where we can create some internal calibrants. We have band flatapole to focus and further remove the neutral molecules. This is our first analyzer, which is segmented quadrupole. This is where we select the ions. The ions then move through the C-trap, which is an injection preparation device for the Orbitrap here. But the ions move through it into ion routing multipole, where they are either fragmented, and fragments are then injected back, or if we do full scan, all the ions are just collected here, cooled down, and sent to C-trap, which squeezes them and sends them to an Orbitrap, which is our high-resolution accurate mass analyzer. So this is how the instrument looks inside. It's pretty simple. There are different upgrades, which you can see in the bottom left corner. But essentially, this is it, just to know, this actually tells you what you can do with the instrument. So these are the specifications. I will not lose too much time here. Can go up to 120,000 resolution. It has the important part is it has a really high interscan dynamic range. This is the thing we use for analyzing small molecules. We actually take the full scan and then potentially the MS2 scan for confirmation, but quantitation is very often done from full scan. For нітрозаміну, actually sometimes also from the MS2 scan. But this is how this works. It's a benchtop, relatively small instrument. It's actually smaller probably than the triple quad, but it has much higher. So it offers the same sensitivity as the mid-tier quadrupole triple quad instrument, but it can offer much more with the high resolution accurate mass. I will speed up a little bit. So one of the options is easy IC ion source. This is the source you saw back here. Hopefully this moves back. This is the source you saw here. We can use this to create like to introduce a compound which we use as an internal calibrant directly into the ion flux. So we don't need to have any external calibration or anything like that. Orbitrap by themselves as an analyzer, they are very, very stable instruments according to the mass accuracy. And this is important if you want to have confidence, if you want to ID something, you need to have accurate mass. So while time of flight is relatively unstable, Orbitrap itself can really keep this mass accuracy for a longer time. Even before we had easy IC, I've seen instruments stable below 1 ppm for more than a week or even longer. Now we are actually with easy IC, we are guaranteeing in specifications that by using that, your mass accuracy will stay below 1 ppm for more than 5 days. It's actually even better. So if the lab is stable, we can keep the mass accuracy much stable for much longer, as you can see here, for 15 days and even more. So this is important for this analysis. Otherwise, you cannot do it. If you don't have really accurate mass, or if your mass will drift after the calibration, you will basically have to calibrate all the time. What we do is start the sequence, finish it, and we still have the stable result. Another thing here is resolution. You will see it later. Resolution is really important for analyzing nitrosamines with the high resolution mass spectrometers. And as you can see here, without enough resolution, we will not be able to separate, let's say, isobaric compounds or really compounds that are really close in mass. This is important also for the nitrosamines. So we are using this resolution, and many other high resolution instruments will not be able to do that. That's why you don't see them in the market, and we are basically the only ones that are promoting high resolution approach for nitrosamine analysis. Another application of the high resolution is actually identification of the compounds. So we use accurate mass, we use isotopical pattern, and because we have high resolution, we can also use fine isotopical pattern where different atoms will also have small differences within the isotopical peaks. So if we can separate that, we can actually get a confirmation how much of the different element is in our compound. So more information we get, the easier it is to confirm that this is really our compound or whatever we want to see. So again, resolution very important. And this is specific case where nitrosamines were analyzed, and here you can see what I mentioned before, NDMA and dimethylformamide is very close in mass. So without enough resolution, you will not be able to separate these two peaks. So basically, you will have a false positive, and you will not even know it. So that's why we need high resolution when we use this approach, and that's also what we are using in our application. That's just one of the examples, but the most kind of obvious one. So this is again the whole solution. I will not spend too much time here. The same thing, Vanquish Core, Vanquish Horizon HPLC, a different column here, but at the end it's your choice. Explore is 120, as I mentioned, or higher. 240 or 480 will do even better realistically. And at the end, Chromeleon chromatography data system, and which is basically a compliance ready. And one specific thing, while other kind of enterprise solutions only support, let's say, triple quadruple mass spectrometers, ours supports a lot of different instruments, including our high resolution mass spectrometers. So basically, that's another reason why nobody is offering basically high resolution approach here, because they cannot make it compliant. We can, because we can support it in our compliance ready software. Okay, so this is the method itself. It doesn't really make sense. It's a simple method. Just here you can see the column. It's a little bit heated up, and we use water methanol with a little bit of formic acid. It's a 12-minute method that was used to analyze the examples you will see. And it's done in the similar timed MS2 way, just for confirmation or for isolating the peak. Normally, as I mentioned, we use APCI ionization, which kind of performs better for majority of the nitrosamine. So this is some of the results. Basically, retention time variation on the chromatography, and basically the same thing on the area of the peak. As you can see here, we have very, very reproducible chromatography, and the same thing for detection of the compound. Here are all the runs overlaid. You can see basically that we always get the same thing. So what this slide is trying to show you, this is a very robust and stable analysis, which we are doing in many, many other sites already. Okay, this is just to show you the same thing, name peaks on top and the blanks down here. Something that is of concern, so NDBA, so that's one peak where this is one of the problems. This is why it's important that you use good solvents. What we have found out that there is a lot of false positives from using, so because NDBA is already present in methanol, in many, many methanol kind of vendors, still have NDBA in their methanol solvent. So we really, suggest to use really good tested MS grade solvents, and then you will not see this peak. This is basically not false positive, but additional peak, which is not really coming from your sample, but actually from the solvent. But we know about it. I'm just showing you that why do you need these really good conditions, so you can notice this and actually don't report something that is not really there. These are in general results on ranitidine. Basically, we are achieving the same levels. Here, the formulation is a little bit different, so you cannot compare it number to number. But be careful if you are reading these applications. It always has to be done on a real sample, and the whole sample prep has to be performed like it really has to be. Adding standards after the sample prep is also not a good idea, because of course you will achieve high sensitivity, but you will not be able to reproduce that in your lab, because you need to reanalyze real samples, not just make a paper with a nice application, nice sensitivity. So all these applications were done, and all the sample prep was done on like you really would do it in a lab. But yeah, sensitivity is basically on a triple quadruple level, which is more than enough to achieve. And like before, we achieve a little bit higher sensitivity for most of the compounds with APCI compared to HESI. But you have actually both, so you can decide depending on the panel you're actually analyzing. All in all, the high resolution mass spec analysis is relatively, like with the triple quads, also robust, but additionally, it offers analysis flexibility, much higher confidence, because you really see what you are analyzing. With the triple quads, there were many cases false positive or something that were not really separated, like different compounds, or it's like I said, if you really know what you need to analyze and there is just a few compounds in the panel, triple quads will do fine. If you need flexibility, if you need more confidence, and if you really want to have the best solution, high resolution mass spec solution is actually the best. And this is after not trying this, but this has been in place for several years, and we have many sites running like this already. So that's kind of coming from experience. So this is basically what we normally suggest, if the budget allows it, of course, and if the customers are kind of want to accept this, because normally a lot of other vendors will only offer triple quad solution, which is at the end cheaper. We can do the same, but of course we always suggest, if you want really the best performance, this is the way to go. That's it. And now, I'm over time. So a few words about Chromeleon. Like I mentioned, there is three important things with the software at the end. So one is instrument control. We have to control all the instruments, and we can control LC, GC, IC, and mass spectrometers, whatever, many different instruments, more than 500 instruments in total. And it's simple and it's relatively straightforward. It is compliance ready software. That means it can be made compliance depending on the regulation, but yeah, it has user level access, audit trails, electronic signatures, all these kind of stuff, backup capabilities, all these things that we can easily make it compliant. And it's enterprise ready, like I mentioned before. It can be one single workstation, or it can be scaled up on a company level, where we have the whole pharma company basically running on one software, from the instrument basically workstations up to the processing workstations, or just QC, which just monitors the results. It's really scalable to whatever you want to do. So that is something we are really proud of. We have really good network failure protection, because as you can see, even if the server is somewhere else on another continent, even if everything is like disturbed, so we don't have an internet connection or like network failure, everything is still done on the workstation. It's just later synchronized with the main server. So basically you don't need anything extra, and it's still fail safe kind of. As long as your workstation works, you will have the results, and they can be updated later to the main server. It's compliance ready software, which means it can be made compliant to any regulation currently going around, and it can really control very well the mass spectrometers, including the high resolution. But not only that, we can cover different vendors, different instruments. This can be really, the company-wide software that covers it all. So this is just a statement, and I will finish now soon. One of the big pharma companies actually tested the main vendors on the market. This is what they came up. This was done before they implemented their нітрозаміну solution. And out of that, this is what they said. Basically, we were the only ones who were able to make the whole installation compliant with triple quadrupole and high resolution MS. And we had basically the best solution. So at the end, this is what they decided for. And it was one of these companies that did that. But essentially, we are supporting Novartis, AstraZeneca, Sanofi, and the contract labs. Basically, there's many different. We have a lot of these installations already. We are supporting many different companies with their full company-wide solutions. Basically, this has become kind of a routine. Novartis is buying several of these instruments all the time for different labs because they have it running. They have like Chromeleon, where everything is relatively easily installed. Everything is checked by QC already. And they just, put the image there, install the instrument, and they have the workflow ready. So everything is possible, basically. All these things that I talked about are going around, can be downloaded and looked in more detail, basically through our application notes, where all these things were done. So they are separated according to triple quad approach, GC approach, orbital, and triple quad basically, and high resolution MS with QE and Boris 120. So here you can see the full basically applications, how it is done, what was used, and so on. That's kind of the proof behind what was done. And for the end, as a summary, of course, without the stable liquid chromatography solution, you will not be able to do anything. This is really important. So we are using our core and flex HPLCs, which are very stable and robust instruments that you can really do this on a day-to-day routine basis. As I mentioned, triple quadrupole workflows work well. They are okay, good enough for not really complex solutions. They can achieve really high throughput, and of course, they are stable instruments. But we prefer to go to our hybrid high-resolution workflows, where we can even achieve some more sensitivity for specific compounds. We have much higher confidence of analysis, and of course, much bigger flexibility to introduce something new or to even detect something it was not there. Triple quad will not see that. Triple quad is a targeted instrument. It will analyze the nitrosamines you select. With the high resolution MS, you will see if there is something else there and something of concern, which is better that you find this out than some agency which will then say, okay, this is all bad, basically, and you have to recall the products from the market. Last but not least, by far, is our software, Chromeleon, which basically enables and ties everything together and makes the whole thing compliant and able to work in a routine environment in a complete and compliant way. That's it from me. So thank you for the attention. And if there are any questions, please come forward. Or I don't know how the questions are.
Thank you, Luka, for very interesting presentation. So we are waiting for the questions. Колеги, будь ласка, нагадую вам, що ви могли залишати і можете зараз залишити запитання у чаті, якщо у вас такі є.
I see some questions, but I don't know if I see the chat.
No, it's not a question. It's just a reminder to our attendees that they could ask something if they have any questions. Okay, I can see any questions in our chat. So
everything was super clear.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe this questions appears a bit later.
Yeah, you can also contact me or ALT or whoever. We are always ready to help. No? That's what we are here for. And yeah, even if you don't have some questions at this time, we can always, answer them or show this out in more detail.
Okay. Колеги, якщо немає запитань, то, мабуть, будемо завершувати. Якщо вони у вас пізніше виникнуть, можливо, після перегляду запису вебінару, ви можете надіслати їх нам, а ми, в свою чергу, перешлемо Луці з проханням відповісти на них. Okay, Luka, we have no questions. Thank you for your presentation again, and thank you for joining our webinar. So, have a nice day.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you and bye. Колеги, до побачення.
Bye-bye.
До побачення всім.